The young and the restless spoiler's shock, a reckoning at the threshold of night. Nate stumbled into his dimly lit bedroom, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. The day's burdens, old betrayals, and the weight of secrets had finally taken their toll. All he longed for was solitude, a moment to close his eyes and let the world fade into a distant hum. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Before he could even sink into the silence of the room, a frantic knocking at his door shattered his fleeting respite. It was Audra again. Her insistent tapping echoed in the narrow hallway, a jarring reminder that unresolved complications had no respect for sleep or tired hearts. With a deep, reluctant sigh, Nate opened the door just a crack, enough to let Audra's tear-streaked face come into view. "You have 10 minutes, Nate stated tersely, his voice a blend of fatigue and controlled irritation. 10 minutes to explain everything. I'm not going to spend all night untangling your mess." Audra's eyes brimmed with tears as she began to speak, her voice quivering under the weight of regret and desperation. "Nate, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I shouldn't have taken you to meet Holden, and I shouldn't have sat down with him to discuss." Her words faltered as sobs overwhelmed her. Nate raised a hand, cutting her off before she could spill more details. "I already know everything, Audra. Don't try to explain further." His tone was hard, laced with the hurt of betrayal and the inevitability of consequences that were now out of her control. For a brief, heart-wrenching moment, the room held a heavy silence as Audra's sobs filled the space, a sound that echoed the pain of regret and the onset of irreversible choices. But the gravity of the situation was far from over. Just as Nate was about to close the door on this chapter of secrets, another piece of information burst through like a storm. A crackling voice over the phone announced an explosive revelation: Audra's biological mother was scheduled to arrive in Genoa this week. The news landed like a sledgehammer in the quiet room, intensifying the already precarious atmosphere. The relationship between Audra and her mother had been anything but loving, riddled with contempt and long-simmering resentments. Now, the inevitable confrontation threatened to expose every sordid detail of Audra's clandestine plans and dirty dealings. Audra's face drained of color as she absorbed the news. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The thought of her mother stepping off that plane, intent on laying bare every misdeed, was too terrifying to contemplate. She knew that once her mother arrived, there was no way to keep Nate and Amy in the dark any longer. They would learn everything, every dirty secret, every betrayal, every desperate decision that had brought them to this very moment. In that charged instant, a desperate plan began to take shape. Audra turned to Holden, whose calm demeanor belied the gravity of the situation. "Holden, we have to stop her," she pleaded, her voice cracking with urgency. "We can't let my mother land in Genoa. If she does, everything will come crashing down. Nate and Amy will know the truth, and I can't bear the thought of that." Holden, whose loyalty had often been questioned but now shone through in his unwavering support for Audra, nodded slowly. "We'll do what we must," he said, his tone resolute. "But Audra, you need to understand what's at stake here. This isn't just about protecting our secrets, it's about preserving your life. And I'm not sure you're ready to do what needs to be done." Audra's eyes widened with dread as she realized the enormity of her predicament. To stop her mother, to truly ensure that none of her past misdeeds were exposed, might require more than cunning schemes or careful planning. It might demand an act so ruthless, a betrayal against the very person who had given her life, that it would forever stain her soul. I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her heart. "Could I ever do something so unthinkable? To harm my own mother just to protect myself?" The room was thick with tension as Nate listened from the threshold, his eyes hardening as he processed Audra's anguished words. His mind raced with conflicting emotions, a deep-seated worry for Audra's well-being and a simmering anger at the consequences of her actions. He knew all too well that the arrival of Audra's mother would not just unearth buried secrets, it would ignite a powder keg of family feuds and past grievances that might destroy them all. Elsewhere in the city, the wheels of destiny churned relentlessly. Nate's protective instincts had been triggered long ago by the tangled web of relationships that defined their lives. His former wives, Phyllis and Sharon, had weathered countless storms, their lives interwoven with betrayal, passion, and redemption. Now, the potential eruption of Audra's past threatened to disrupt the precarious balance they had all fought so hard to maintain. Nick and Amy, once reluctant participants in this drama, were on the brink of learning truths that might shatter their already fragile world. As the minutes ticked by, Audra's despair deepened. The possibility of her mother's arrival was not merely a personal crisis, it was an existential threat to the carefully constructed facade of her life. Every secret, every lie, every desperate decision that had led her to this moment was poised to come crashing down. And amidst it all, Holden stood as both her accomplice and her conscience, urging caution even as his own determination hardened. In the silent corridors of her mind, Audra weighed the unthinkable. Could she truly cross the line, commit an act of unspeakable betrayal against the one person who had given her everything, in a bid to preserve her own safety? The thought was abhorrent and nearly unbearable. Yet, the alternative, facing the judgment of her mother, exposing every hidden truth to Nate and Amy, and losing all the semblance of control over her life, was far worse. Outside, the night grew darker and colder, a reflection of the turmoil inside. Nate's tired eyes searched for answers in the half-light, knowing that every moment wasted only brought the inevitable confrontation closer. His voice, when he finally spoke again, was low and measured, carrying the weight of countless disappointments and hard-won wisdom. Audra, you need to decide now. We're standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move, and everything falls apart. I can't help you if you don't help yourself. Her silence was deafening, broken only by the soft sound of her trembling breaths. The responsibility that lay before her was monstrous, and the decision she had to make was one that would define her very existence. In the end, the choices in life are never simple. They are a tangled mess of duty, love, regret, and survival. And in this moment, Audra was forced to confront the darkest corners of her heart, where fear and ambition waged a silent war. As the clock continued to count down the minutes, the gravity of the situation pressed in on all of them. Holden's presence was a constant reminder of the precarious line between loyalty and complicity, while Nate's stern gaze conveyed the depth of his disappointment and the unyielding truth that the past could not be easily forgotten. And somewhere, in the depths of the night, the specter of Audra's mother loomed, an unstoppable force of nature that threatened to upend the fragile equilibrium of their lives. In that critical juncture, the fate of so many hung in the balance. Could Audra, driven by desperation and regret, find the strength to alter her course without sacrificing everything she held dear? Or would the crushing weight of her past force her into a decision so ruthless that it would forever sever the bonds of family and trust? The coming days would decide, as the impending arrival of her mother promised not just a revelation of long-hidden secrets, but a reckoning that none of them could escape. Thus, as the night wore on and the 10-minute deadline approached, the echoes of regret and determination reverberated through the silent room. In that small, confined space, the lives of Nate, Audra, Holden, Amy, and even those yet to be directly involved, were poised on the razor's edge between redemption and ruin, a delicate balance that could shatter at the slightest misstep. And as the final moments ticked away, the unspoken question loomed large: in the fight for survival and the pursuit of truth, how far would one go before the cost became too high to bear? Nate had been waiting all day for a message that, as it turned out, would change the course of events in ways he could scarcely imagine. His phone had buzzed with an unexpected notification, one that bore the unmistakable signature of Audra's mother. Eager and anxious, Nate read the message over and over, his pulse quickening as he anticipated the meeting with his ex-mother-in-law, a woman whose opinions had always carried weight in his turbulent life. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the bombshell that was about to be dropped. When the time came, Nate met Audra's mother in a quiet corner of the city, her eyes burning with an intensity that belied her calm demeanor. As they exchanged terse greetings, she wasted no time in delivering her message. "Nate," she began, her voice resolute and unyielding, I'm not here to rekindle old flames or to engage in any frivolous liaison with you. I'm here to warn you about my daughter, Audra. Her words struck Nate like a thunderclap. What do you mean? He demanded, his tone a mixture of incredulity and apprehension. The woman's gaze hardened as she explained, Audra is nothing more than a scammer, a deceitful trickster who's been weaving webs of lies and manipulating those around her. I never wanted this for her, but she has chosen a dark path, one that endangers not just herself but everyone entangled in her schemes. Before Nate could fully process her words, another twist in the tale emerged. Audra's mother continued, and there's more. I have brought my daughter to Genoa. The revelation was as startling as it was damning. By having Audra appear here, in the very heart of their shared world, her mother intended to prove to everyone, Nate included, that her warnings were justified. The implication was clear. Audra was not coming to offer any form of reconciliation or to salvage what little remained of her credibility. She was here to expose her true self, to lay bare the charade she had maintained for so long. For Nate, the news was both a relief and a further source of disillusionment. He had long suspected that Audra's charming facade concealed a labyrinth of deceit, but hearing it confirmed by someone who had known her all her life was like a final nail in the coffin. With Audra's return to Genoa now confirmed, Nate's mind raced with the potential fallout. He knew that she wouldn't go unpunished. Both he and Devon, a man who had his own deep-seated grudges and scars from past betrayals, were determined that Audra faced the consequences of her actions. The inevitable confrontation loomed large, and the air was thick with anticipation and dread. In the chaotic maze of shifting loyalties and unspoken grudges, a question began to echo in every anxious heart. Would Tucker, Audra's steadfast guardian angel, emerge as her savior? Tucker had long been her lucky charm, the one constant amid the storm of her treacherous choices. His reputation for having a knack for salvaging even the most hopeless situations was legendary. Rumors swirled among those in the know that Tucker's interventions had often steered Audra away from the brink of disaster. Now, as the stakes grew impossibly high, the possibility of Tucker's reappearance was the slender hope that Audra clung to. Audra's situation had spiraled into a maelstrom of impending doom. Her duplicitous ways had finally caught up with her, and it was clear that her life was on the verge of unraveling completely. Nate and Devon, both victims of her elaborate ruses, were now poised to confront her with all the fury and disillusionment that years of betrayal had amassed. The prospect of their retribution was terrifying, and for Audra, the thought of facing these formidable adversaries was almost paralyzing. As the days in Genoa passed, tension mounted. Audra's mother's warning had sent shockwaves through the community. Conversations in hushed tones, furtive glances exchanged in shadowed corridors, and the palpable sense of anticipation in every interaction painted a picture of an impending reckoning. Nate, with his calm yet determined exterior, was preparing for a showdown that he knew would test the very limits of his resolve. His past with Audra was marred by lies and manipulations, and he had no intention of allowing her to slip away unscathed this time. Devon, too, was mobilizing his forces, both physical and emotional, to ensure that Audra's treachery was exposed for all to see. His loyalty to the principles of honesty and integrity, though often challenged by the complexities of their intertwined past, was unwavering in the face of Audra's deceit. Together, Nate and Devon represented the forces of retribution, their shared determination a stark counterpoint to Audra's crumbling world of falsehoods. In the midst of this volatile mix, Tucker's potential re-entry into the narrative was a beacon of uncertain hope. Known for his unflinching loyalty and his almost preternatural ability to sense when disaster was imminent, Tucker had been Audra's protector in previous crises. Many in their circle recalled how his timely interventions had once steered her away from making irrevocable mistakes. Now, as the web of lies threatened to entangle her completely, the question loomed large: would Tucker once again step in to save Audra from the consequences of her own making? Or had the scales of fate finally tipped so far against her that even Tucker's legendary luck could no longer reverse her course? For Audra, the stakes were nothing short of existential. The arrival of her mother in Genoa was not just a personal crisis, it was a public declaration that her days of deception were numbered. Her mother's determination to expose the truth, to dismantle the carefully constructed edifice of lies that Audra had built around herself, signaled an irrevocable turning point. The potential exposure of her schemes would not only devastate her reputation but would also shatter any remaining semblance of control over her life. As the confrontation grew imminent, each character found themselves at a crossroads. Nate's hope of a just reckoning was tempered by the knowledge that even the most hardened hearts could be swayed by the truth. Devon's resolve was unyielding, a silent promise that no one would escape the consequences of their actions. And amid it all, Tucker's shadow loomed large, a reminder that sometimes, even in the darkest moments, there was a glimmer of salvation. The tension in Genoa was palpable, each moment heavy with the potential for explosive revelations. In private meetings and whispered conversations, the inevitability of Audra's downfall was discussed with a mixture of relief and sorrow. For many, the impending collapse of her carefully maintained facade was a long overdue vindication. Yet, even as justice seemed within reach, the human cost of such revelations weighed heavily on all involved. Families, long fractured by secrets and betrayals, stood on the brink of further disintegration. In a final, fateful twist, the stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. Audra, forced to confront the harsh reality of her choices, had little time to decide her next move. Would she attempt to salvage her reputation by seeking refuge in Tucker's protective embrace, or would she succumb to the inevitable wrath of Nate and Devon, a punishment that promised to strip away every last vestige of her deceit? The answer lay in the balance, teetering on the edge of a precipice that could plunge her into irredeemable ruin. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ancient streets of Genoa, every character in this unfolding drama braced for what was to come. The truth, as it always does, was on the verge of emerging from the darkness, an unyielding force that would not be denied. Nate, with his heart hardened by years of betrayal yet still burning with a desire for justice, waited for the moment when all would be revealed. Devon, a man who had long carried the scars of deceit, was ready to enforce the price of dishonesty. And somewhere, in the midst of the chaos, Tucker's presence promised a glimmer of hope, a chance, however slim, that Audra might yet find a path back to redemption. In this relentless dance of fate, where every secret and lie was poised to be unveiled, the lives of Nate, Audra, Devon, and Tucker were intertwined in a tapestry of revenge, redemption, and inevitable reckoning. Audra's deception, once a shield against the world, was now her greatest vulnerability, a weakness that threatened to consume her entirely. And as Genoa prepared to bear witness to the fallout, one thing remained certain: the truth would be revealed, and in its unyielding light, no shadow could remain hidden. In the heart of Genoa, where the tangled webs of deceit and redemption were already well established, Audra and Holden had devised what they believed was a flawless plan to halt the impending disaster. The stakes were higher than ever, with family secrets threatening to burst into the light and shatter the delicate balance that had been maintained for far too long. Determined to keep the past from consuming the present, they resolved to take drastic measures. Their strategy was simple yet audacious: send Audra's mother a substantial sum of money and demand, in no uncertain terms, that she never set foot in Genoa again. For Audra, this plan was a lifeline, a final attempt to keep her tumultuous past from jeopardizing the life she was desperately trying to salvage. Every moment leading up to this decision had been fraught with tension and the haunting echoes of past betrayals. Audra's mother, a woman whose own history was as volatile as it was unyielding, had long been a source of scandal and sorrow. Her repeated incursions into Audra's life had only deepened the wounds of betrayal and mistrust, and the promise of her disappearance was the one certainty Audra clung to in these uncertain times. Holden, ever the stoic and reliable partner, had worked tirelessly with Audra to craft this proposal. His calm demeanor masked an inner resolve to protect the woman he cared for, even as her past threatened to undo everything they had built together. With meticulous attention to detail, they prepared the funds, a sum large enough to buy silence, or at least to serve as a temporary shield against further intrusion. It was their final gambit, a financial peace offering coupled with an unyielding demand for distance. In their eyes, this was the only way to ensure that the chaos would not spiral further out of control. Meanwhile, Nate's patience was wearing thin. Having endured years of manipulation and heartbreak, he was determined that the woman he loved must come with a past. A history as clear and unblemished as possible. Nate had made it clear that any semblance of ambiguity or deceit would no longer be tolerated. In his mind, the woman who stood before him had to be more than a collection of half-truths and elusive promises. Thus, he resolved that if Audra's mother failed to honor the arrangement by staying away from Genoa, he would journey to Los Angeles himself to confront her. Nate's decision was not driven solely by a desire for retribution, but by a deep-seated belief that honesty and transparency were the cornerstones of any lasting relationship. As the plan unfolded, the atmosphere was charged with both hope and trepidation. Audra, acutely aware of the magnitude of her transgressions, found herself on bended knee, figuratively, if not literally, begging Nate for forgiveness. Her eyes, red-rimmed and glistening with unshed tears, conveyed a sincerity that had been absent in previous encounters. "Nate," she pleaded, her voice trembling with both fear and determination, "if I've done anything wrong, if I've betrayed you in any way, please give me a chance to make it right. I need you by my side, and I promise that I will do everything in my power to correct my mistakes. Don't ever leave me." Her plea was laden with the weight of countless missteps and the desperate desire to atone for the sins of her past. It was not merely a request for pardon, but a vow, a solemn promise that she would transform herself to become the woman Nate believed she could be. In that raw, vulnerable moment, the past seemed to recede into the background, eclipsed by the possibility of a future defined by honesty and mutual respect. Yet, the plan was as delicate as it was dangerous. Audra's mother, a formidable presence in her own right, had a reputation for unwavering determination and a fierce loyalty to her own brand of truth. The large sum of money, though substantial, was only as effective as the resolve behind it. Should Audra's mother accept the deal, it would be a victory for everyone involved, a promise that the vicious cycle of betrayal would be interrupted, if only for a while. But if she refused, the consequences would be dire. Nate's impending journey to Los Angeles was not merely a threat, it was a declaration that the truth must prevail, no matter how painful the cost. The tension in Genoa was palpable as the day of reckoning drew near. In quiet boardrooms and hushed conversations at shadowed cafes, word of the plan spread like wildfire. Each retelling added layers of complexity and risk. Friends and foes alike weighed in on the potential outcomes. Would Audra's mother honor the terms, sealing her fate in exchange for wealth and quiet? Or would her own fiery spirit lead her to defy the ultimatum, thereby triggering a cascade of revelations that could irrevocably alter the lives of everyone involved? Nate's own inner turmoil was a complex tapestry of anger, love, and resignation. Despite his hardened exterior, a part of him still yearned for the possibility that Audra could emerge unscathed from the darkness of her past. However, the integrity of the woman he loved was non-negotiable. Her history, if left unexamined and uncorrected, threatened to unravel everything he had worked so hard to build, a life of clarity, trust, and unwavering commitment. Nate's ultimatum was not just about punishment, it was a call for transformation, a demand that Audra confront and reconcile with the ghosts that had haunted her for so long. And then there was Holden, the quiet yet resolute guardian of Audra's fate. His role in this saga was more than that of a mere accomplice, he was the anchor in a storm of shifting loyalties and uncertain futures. Holden's belief in the possibility of redemption had been tested time and again, yet he remained steadfast. His calm presence served as a reminder that even the most tumultuous storms could be weathered if there was enough resolve to see the promise of a new dawn. His commitment to Audra was absolute, a silent vow that he would stand by her side, guiding her through the treacherous terrain of her past misdeeds toward the light of a clearer, more honest future. As the final hours before the planned confrontation approached, every heartbeat in Genoa seemed to echo with the possibility of change or calamity. Audra's desperate plea for forgiveness, the promise of a fresh start, and the looming threat of Nate's determination to see the truth exposed were all threads in a tapestry that could either mend a fractured family or tear it apart irreparably. In that crucible of emotion and ambition, the path forward was as uncertain as it was fraught with peril. In the end, the stakes were simple yet profound. Audra had to prove that her love for Nate and her commitment to a better future outweighed the shadows of her past. If her mother's departure could be secured with the weight of wealth and the firmness of an unyielding demand, perhaps then the long road to redemption could begin in earnest. But if not, the ensuing fallout would leave scars that no amount of money or promises could ever hope to heal. Thus, as the city of Genoa held its breath in anticipation, every character braced for the inevitable confrontation. It was a moment where the past met the present, a crucible in which only the truth, and the courage to embrace it, could prevail. And in that delicate balance between despair and hope, Audra's future hung in the balance, defined by the choices she made in the fleeting moments before destiny could no longer be delayed.